Hello, John aka Chicken Fillets here, and the PS Vita is one of my all-time favourite handhelds, consoles, whatever you want to think of it as. The reason for this is, well, basically the PS Vita is a JRPG machine, and you know JRPGs and me go together like bread and butter, or something of the likes. Weird analogy. So with that in mind, I wanted to share my top 10 PS Vita JRPGs. But before we get onto that, please remember to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with your favourite PS Vita games. Anyway, let's get cracking on with the video. I've had too much coffee.
Now, kicking things off on the list is Ys Memories of Celceta, which is actually the first Ys game that I'd ever actually played. This PS Vita action JRPG is actually a remake of one of the earlier Ys games, which was released many moons ago. So as per the norm with any Ys games, we follow Adol Kristen, who this time has amnesia. This time round, Adol has been commissioned to create a map for the Forest of Celceta, and during this task he will look to regain his memories. Now, as you can expect with any Ys game or Falcom game in general, you will have a cracking time with this story. The combat is fast paced and the music, another belter. This Vita title would later get ported to the likes of PlayStation 4, so if you don't have a Vita and you want to play it, well, you've not got an excuse now, it's on there as well. Oh, and it's also on PC, before I forget. Next up, a PS Vita exclusive in the shape of Freedom Wars. Now, this PS Vita exclusive was made by Japan Studio. RIP Japan Studio. Now, Freedom Wars essentially plays similar to the likes of either God Eater or Monster Hunter, where you and your cast of characters will take on massive creatures terrorizing the ruins of the world. Now, I really like the emphasis of this story where the ruin is basically a world and resources are limited. So when you're born, basically, you're jailed for about 1 million years and you have to work that debt off by going into battle for your colonies. The aesthetics behind this world I really like. However, even though that the gameplay isn't really groundbreaking or new, it's still a fantastic time. Realistically, I'd love to see Sony pick this IP back up, but, you know, with Japan Studio no longer being with us, well, our hopes is kind of not happening. Tales of Hearts are the PS Vita exclusive title, which, again, this was my first forte into the Tales of series. Now, from my understanding as well, that this is actually a remake of a Japan-only Nintendo 3DS title. Now, Tales of Hearts R really does hold a special place in my heart, as this was my first rodeo with the Tales of series, and it just reminded me of playing Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1 with having an overworld map, and just the way that the story was portrayed and the characters were portrayed as well. Now, this title does have the linear motion battle system, which you'll find in most Tales of games. Is it one of the best Tales of games? Far from it, but it's still a brilliant title on the PS Vita. Next up is Final Fantasy X and X Part 2 HD, but to be honest with you, I'm mainly focusing on 10. Now, a fun little fact with this is that if I did not play this version of Final Fantasy X, I would not be a fan of this game at all, because when I was growing up and the original Final Fantasy X got released on PS2, my little brain didn't like the game because it didn't have a world map like Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and 9, and I didn't like change. I know, what a stupid kid I was. This Final Fantasy is an absolute classic with a memorable story, a memorable cast of characters, a fantastic combat system to boot, and a brilliant soundtrack. Everything about the world of Spira is so memorable, and you will fall in love with this as much as I did. Following the adventure of Tidus or Tidus or whatever you want to call him, because you know that debate will always happen forever and ever and ever, help Yuna on her pilgrimage to defeat Sin was just an amazing story, and to have this on a handheld where I could play it at any point in time was just amazing. And this is why it's placed on this list. I'm not going to bother talking about Final Fantasy X Part 2 because, well, it's Final Fantasy X Part 2. Odin Sphere, and I'm not even going to try and say the last part because I will get it wrong and I've never been able to pronounce it. But yes, Odin Sphere for the PS Vita is next on this list. Now, Odin Sphere is actually a remake of the PlayStation 2 title from Atlus and Vanillaware. Now, with this being a Vanillaware title, you will instantly see how gorgeous this game. There is no other studio like Vanillaware that produces this level of artwork. This game follows multiple characters which you will play through each story. Now, this is a side-scrolling action JRPG, and I tell you what, the combat in this is so satisfying. Now, every character that you play as has a unique battle style, and when you really start getting into a character and you finish their story, you've got to relearn how to play as these different characters, and it's really, really fun. One thing I do regret though is not picking this up physically. I downloaded it digitally on a sale, and it's so expensive to buy now physically. Oh, woe is me, woe is me. In at number 5 is Tokyo Xanadu. Now this is a fantastic title from Falcom. This title is essentially if Falcom decided to merge Persona with Ys Combat. You'll be playing as a group of high schoolers which are transported to an alternative dimension where you will face lots and lots of monsters in action-based combat. Now, as per the norm with any Falcom game, you will be expecting high-octane action and a banger. And yes, I've said this multiple times before about any Falcom game, the music is always stellar. Now, if you really like the look of this game and you want to play it, but you don't have a Vita, well, it is available on the PlayStation 4. If Falcom's watching, you know, we want a sequel, please, because Tokyo Xanadu is a fantastic IP, and we want more. Next up, Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana. And yes, look, it's another Falcom game because Falcom was really killing it on the PS Vita. Now, Ys 8 is one of the fan favourite titles of the Ys series, and there's no wonder why. This has got the best exploration which has been in the series thus far. The music, once again, is stellar, and the combat is quick and fast paced. This has a brilliant story as well, which spans over time. You'll set out over the island of Siren, where Adol's been shipwrecked once again because, you know, never get on a boat with Adol because something's clearly going to go wrong. And you'll also experience the island from a different pair of eyes of Dana. Now, this PS Vita title is actually available on the PlayStation and Nintendo Switch as well, and I think it's also on the PC. And most of the modern ports as well of this title will have all the additional content added into it. Ys 8 is a fantastic title. If you've not experienced this one and want to get into the Ys series for the first time, this is definitely an amazing starting point for you. In at number 3 is Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 1. And me oh my, yes, it's another Falcom title. Now, this is the first entry in the Erebonia arc of the Trails of series, and it was also the first time that the series went in a 3D direction compared to the likes of Trails in the Sky and the Crossbell arc. Now, in this title, we follow Rien Schwarzer and Class 7 whilst they are spending their time at Thor's military academy. This turn-based JRPG has it all. It has a fantastic story to boot, amazing music, amazing cast of characters. It's just the full package. Now this was my first forte into the Trails of series, and I will always cherish this game because everything about this opened up new avenues of gaming for me. In at number 2 is The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 2, the sequel to the previous entry Trails of Cold Steel, and the previous entry on this list. Yes, I'm confusing things, I know. Now, Cold Steel 2 follows directly from the story of Cold Steel 1, and if you know the story well of Cold Steel, you'll know you wanted to get straight into Cold Steel 2. What Falcom did with Cold Steel 2 is they took everything that they learned from Cold Steel 1 and just amped it up to 11, and it is honestly one of the best follow-up titles to be released for any JRPG series. I've replayed Cold Steel 2 a fair amount of times because I just love this story and the cast of characters in it. Cold Steel is just a fantastic arc in the Trails of series. And to be able to visit this world at the palm of my hand was just amazing, and is always amazing when playing it on the PS Vita. Now before we find out what my number 1 game is on the PS Vita, let's have a look at some honourable mentions. Gravity Rush. Now, I actually wanted to include this on the list properly, however, unfortunately, this game's really classed as an action-adventure game and not a JRPG as such, so I wanted to keep it strictly JRPGs, but I had to mention this game because it's just fantastic with the adventures of our gravity shifter Cat. Using her gravity shifting powers to fly about all over the place, well, should I say fly? Float? Maybe? And also using these gravity powers to help her with combat against the evil bad guys. And you know, with me and music, I love this soundtrack for this game. The theme Old Town is one of my all-time favourite compositions from any video game in general. Cosmic Star Heroine, the JRPG indie game from Zeboyd Games. Now, this game just missed the cut, but I wanted to show it off as well because it is a fantastic indie JRPG. This spy sci-fi JRPG is really inspired by the likes of Chrono Trigger with its battle system, and the game is gorgeous with its pixel art. Just look at it. Look how gorgeous it is. Now, this is actually one of the few titles that I've ever ordered from Limited Run Games, so I've got the physical edition for this for my PS Vita, which actually has a manual in it. It's not often that you get games with manuals in it now. World of Final Fantasy is a celebration of everything Final Fantasy, and it's a very cutesy game with its chibi characters. Now, what I do remember is that unfortunately this game got announced right before Final Fantasy VII Remake got announced at E3. What a disaster for the game. Honestly, the World of Final Fantasy is an underrated JRPG, so I wanted to include it in this list. If you haven't played it, give it a try, and you might see other of your favourite Final Fantasy characters appear in this game. So with the honourable mentions out the way, let's see what my number 1 PS Vita JRPG is. Now, to the surprise of no one, the number 1 spot goes to Persona 4 Golden, the remaster of the PS2 JRPG classic. Now, Persona 4 Golden is one of my all-time favourite JRPGs. It was the first proper JRPG I experienced out with Final Fantasy. And it's the first time that I ever completed a JRPG and thought to myself, I need to replay this straight away. And I chucked in another 100 plus hours into the game straight after I completed it for the first time. The way that this game is presented with the calendar system, the explorations of the dungeons, whilst also having the social side when you're in the town of Inaba, the high school, etc. This was all totally brand new to me, and I fell in love with this title straight away. I wanted to know more about the characters through the bond system. I wanted to know who was the mysterious killer in the town of Inaba. I just wanted to spend more and more time in this town. As I mentioned, Persona 4 Golden is one of my all-time favourite JRPGs, so it definitely deserves the the #1 spot on this list. So there we have it. Those are my top 10 PS Vita JRPGs. What is your all-time favourite JRPG on the PS Vita? Well, let me know in the comments down below. Now, if you like what you're hearing and seeing on the channel and you want to help me grow it, well, please like, share and subscribe. And if you want to be kept up to date with everything Chicken Fillets, well, hit that notification bell. This has been John, aka Chicken Fillets, and until next time, tatty bye!